or a few minutes after, we're going to call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum of 4. Hello, is this, okay. I have to eat the microphone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our visitors on Zoom. And this begins our afternoon session of the Grounds Committee. And we will start with a roll call.
Paula Connors.
Present.
Don Ellwinger. Oh, good timing. Jim Shaw. Jean Dasher. Thank you.
I'm going to call for approval of the minutes from the meeting of July 22nd. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read. I move approval. I need a second. Jean seconds. All those in favor? The motion passes. And on to item 3 on our agenda. Nick Schiebert will be joining us this afternoon, is here. And we've invited him to talk about Assembly Bill 1572. Nick has an affiliation with the Carson Companies, among other things, but I'm going to ask Nick to introduce himself. And the idea is that he'll offer some overview comments regarding the legislation, implementation, and hopefully we'll have some time for question and answers afterwards. Nick, it's yours.
Thank you. So I've been here speaking in front of this group a few times. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So I'll just start with a little introduction. My name is Nick Schiebert. I work for Carson Landscape. I've been there for 25 years. I act in many different roles, but for today's purpose, I'm here as a consultant. I advise the company and our clients on many things, but in this case, we're speaking of irrigation. And I've tried to make myself as familiar as I can about the AB 1572 when it first passed. So I was going to share with everybody some facts from it. And then from that, I'll kind of go into a little bit about what it really means, or what we think it means, because there's a lot of room for interpretation, and what the expectancy of the state is to even do with it. I have worked in the landscape industry since 92, 94, somewhere in there. They're about 30 years now. On different roles. I'm a graduate of UC Davis in plant science, and my focus, my area of study focus was ornamental horticulture. So I'm quite versed in plant care, pests, irrigation needs, soil needs. I've served as and have had many different certifications of various types for various needs, including a certified agronomist, certified pest control advisor, and also I have several certifications in irrigation with I'm a certified auditor for the state, and I do quite a bit of consulting work in that area. So we'll just jump into the AB 1572, and I just put together some information here you see on the screen. This is the actual wording from the law. One of the reasons why I like to, whenever I am asked, or when I need to understand a law, if you go on the internet and just kind of search for it, you're going to find all kinds of misinformation on it. Where other people have applied their opinions to it, and it's not necessarily all accurate. So I always go right to the law, and I draw my own conclusions from that. And the wording in it is pretty simple once you break it down a little bit. But it states that the use of potable water for the irrigation of non-functional turf located on commercial, industrial, and institutional properties other than a cemetery, and on properties of homeowners associations, common interest developments, and community service organizations of similar entities is prohibited. The facts of this statement, and I'm going to go a little bit into the definitions of what some of these words mean in a minute, so we can understand what non-functional turf really means. If you have questions, just raise your hand, but I might cover it in a moment. The facts of this is it does not apply to residential areas, including apartments. So there's no statements in here about that homeowners for their individual homes has to do anything different for their lawns and the turf in front of their houses or in their backyards, and as well as apartments. Those are both specifically excluded. It does mention HOAs, which is why we're all here today. In HOAs, the statement says it's only allowed on the individual homes. So we have to think about HOAs as they mean different things to different area, different people, different types of developments. So in a home, single family home HOA, everybody has their own house, and it's very definitive. It's stating that the areas at their house are excluded from this. The areas that aren't excluded are what they say are the common areas of a HOA. And in that example of a single family HOA, you might have a park in the HOA, or you might have some turf at the main entry, or you might have some turf around a clubhouse. Those would be things that would be considered common areas and would be having to relate to this law. Where it gets a little tricky then is a HOA like yours. You don't have individual homes, and so what is the interpretation or the way it's applied to this type of setting? So I'll go into that in just a moment, a little more in depth. Just a couple other facts that the state of California did put this type of restriction into play as an emergency regulation starting in June of 2022. So this actually isn't new. In June of 2022, they passed an emergency regulation that made the same statements. And the facts of this is in June of 2022, nobody is following it. There might be a few places if you drive down the road, on a side of the road, you might see the grass is brown, where they might be trying to comply. But in the reality of it, the general overall population of the state of California has not followed this regulation, even though it's been in effect since 2022. Yes.
I was just curious, the temporary ban, is the temporary ban that you're talking about on watering, or is it what is the temporary ban?
The same exact wording was used in
It's in the
their
law?
non-functional turf in these areas are not to be irrigated.
Oh, okay.
Same exact wording. The difference in the temporary ban is it was only good for 1 year at a time. So in June of 2022, they said it would be good through July of 23. And in July of 23, they renewed it. And I haven't heard what they did with it this year, if they just left it alone and it's now expired. I haven't heard that it was renewed or not. But my point for all this is they put into effect this ruling that no one followed, and more importantly, nobody has enforced. And the reason, in my opinion, of this is the state has put forth this rule with no way and nobody in place to be able to enforce it. So without any enforcement, no one, of course, is going to just do it. Some will, but most won't. And is the case of this AB 1572. they didn't put any wording into the law or anything to create a way to enforce it. The typical way that these things have been enforced when there are watering restrictions that are put into play when we're in actual drought years is they put it onto the water providers. So whoever you buy your water from, in this case, it's the city of Sacramento, they have to enforce this law. When I've met with any of the different people in the different water agencies in Sacramento, we have like 30 water agencies. So there's a lot of different players here that are involved. None of them say they have the resources, the people, or the interest to enforce it. So that might change when we get closer to these dates we're going to go forward, look at in a minute. But that's the reality of this is none of the local agencies, if they're going to have to be the ones taxed with regulating this and enforcing it, have any interest of doing so. And so what the thing is we just don't know how this is going to play out. The law goes into effect as a staged each year. It's going to be supposed to go into effect for different areas. So in January 2027, it's supposed to go in effect for state properties. We'll see if the state follows through on their own properties. January 28th for commercial properties like shopping centers, office complexes, those type of things. January 2029 would be when it's supposed to go into effect for HOAs. And my understanding of that date is you would have until the end of the year to comply. And I'll tell you a little bit about what they do say is the way you comply. And then 2030 for local government properties. So like city owned properties, county owned properties. They're the last ones that have to comply. And I believe schools might fit in that category. And the statement in the law says people will certify that they're doing it. They call it self-certify. There'll be a form that you have to fill out and send in to somebody, maybe to the state, and that says you're complying. Again, we don't know what that form looks like, and we don't know who it's going to be sent to. It has not been defined. Let's go into a few definitions so we can understand what turf really on these areas does have to be not watered by potable water. So a common area, and these are their definitions right out of the law text, means a portion of a common interest development of a property owned or managed by a homeowners association or a community service organization or similar entity that is not assigned or allocated to the exclusive use of the occupants of an individual dwelling unit within the property. So for your property, how is that interpreted? Does that mean the turf in front of people's condos? Is that the right word? These are condos or homes of your buildings? Units. Okay. So does that mean the turf in front of in the individual units, which are multifamily, would be excluded? Or does that mean since it's owned by the association, does that mean it's included? It doesn't go into that anywhere. We'll come back to that. Functional turf. Functional turf is any ground cover surface of turf located in a recreational use area or a community space. Turf enclosed by fencing or other barriers to permanently preclude human access for recreation or assembly is not functional turf. So again, a little bit of interpretation here, but my interpretation of this is if it's used for recreational purposes, whatever that recreation may be, then it would be excluded. So there could be arguments for some of your areas in here that might make it be considered functional. Non-functional turf means any turf that is not functional. Nice state law or state definitions here. and includes turf located within street right-of-way and parking lots. So it's street right-of-ways is pretty definitive. Anything along the side or in the middle of a street is a street right-of-way, and parking lots is turf within parking areas. And turf is a ground cover surface of mowed grass, annual bluegrass, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, red fescue, tall fescue, are cool season type of grasses, Bermuda grass, kikuya, seashore, passelpatum. I won't go into all these. You don't have them, but buffalo grass isn't one that's of importance because in the temporary ban, they do call out that you can have certain grasses that use low amounts of water. And it says in that temporary ban, you could use buffalo grass. And that has been one people have been looking at. Well, we'll just change our grass from our ryegrass and bluegrass to this buffalo grass. But in this particular law, it's not allowed to be any grass that's irrigated by any quantity. So that exception or a possibility is gone now. So let's talk a little bit about these definitions. So being that these things do have some vague meanings when it comes to your property specifically, the only way I can see getting a clarity on this and how it's going to be interpreted by whomever may interpret it would be my advice. And we had met with earlier this year with I believe the board was that group at the time. My recommendation is you get in contact with the city. They're the ones that are going to be the ones probably having to enforce this if they ever choose to. And they would have to be the ones that would give their opinion of what your turf that you have, what it fits under. Because that's the only way. We can sit here and make guesses to what we think it is, and I can tell you what I think it is, but it's really going to come down to what they think it is. But again, that's if and when they ever choose to enforce it. So right now, they probably won't have an opinion. Trees. So one thing that's come up is, what if I have trees? There is statements in there about trees, and the statement says, notwithstanding subdivision A, which is what we were just talking about, the use of potable water is not prohibited in the extent necessary to ensure the health of trees and other perennial non-turf plantings. So perennial non-turf plantings are trees and shrubs. So if there are trees and shrubs in a lawn area, turf area, they are saying you can keep watering those. So what does that mean? Because usually you have a lawn area, let's just take a simple case that might have 1 or 2 trees in it. The sprinklers are watering the large area of lawn, and they just happen to be getting those 2 trees wet and getting those trees irrigated. So does that interpretation mean I can keep watering the whole area where all this grass is so I can keep these 2 trees alive? Or does it mean I have to change my irrigation so only those trees get watered and the grass does not? My belief is it's the latter interpretation would be what would be the thing that they're going to be looking for. So there are some people trying to say, well, I've got trees in my lawn, so I just keep watering all my grass. Some people are making that stance, but it may not be allowed by whomever is going to be taxed with enforcing this. I keep making that statement because no one has come out and made any judgments to this, including the state. It's just something passed by the governor and an assembly person, and there's nothing been put behind how it's going to happen. Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. So it says notwithstanding subdivision A, the use of potable water is not prohibited by this section to the extent necessary to ensure the health of trees and other perennial non-turf plantings. Okay, so 2 things. One is potable water. So we could use underground water, well water, river water, since we're by the river? I mean, we could use other water to water our grass?
So potable water in the state's eyes is any water that's considered suitable for drinking. So if you were to put a well in, technically that's potable water because well water is suitable for drinking. So I don't think a well source being added would suffice. If you were able to get water from the river, which good luck there, there's water rights that would supersede anybody trying to get water out of it. That would not be potable water. Or if reclaimed water, which is available in some areas of the state, some areas of the city, reclaimed water, then if someone had reclaimed water as their source, then they could water all day long. Well, not technically. but-
Okay, thank you. I was just clarifying. And then to ensure the health of trees and other perennial non-turf plantings.
Yeah.
So if we have flowers or other things we can keep nearby, or what does that mean?
That would be my interpretation of it, that if these things were growing in the grass areas and being watered by the grass areas, sprinkler systems, because none of this would apply to your shrub areas, which have their own irrigation system or own irrigation valve. When we turn on irrigation for the shrubs, they get watered by a valve, and then there's a separate valve that waters the grass. So none of this would apply to anything that's of your shrubs.
What's an example of other perennial non-turf plantings that would,
Everything you just mentioned.
but that would have to be
Perennial
in the-
non-turf
that have
plantings.
to be in the grass?
They would have to be in the grass and being watered by the grass sprinkling system in order to maybe be considered as a way around it.
I'm just clarifying because people are going to try to brainstorm to keep our grass, so.
I don't think you have any areas where you have perennial non-turf plantings being irrigated by sprinklers that are hitting grass.
Okay.
That'd be like you have a lawn area and you just cut a circle out in the middle and put some flowers in it, and it's getting irrigated by the sprinklers in the grass. You don't have anything like that
Good. Okay.
that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thanks. Oh, no.
Yeah, now it is. So just a point of clarification. So all our systems have been separated. So all the hedges and everything are now separated from the grass.
Not 100%. You still have some, we identified many zones that you have where you turn the valve on, some sprinklers are hitting grass, some sprinklers are hitting the ground cover or shrub areas. Those still exist. Nothing was done to change that. It was considered to be done, but it wasn't ever approved. So you still have areas but you don't have areas that are being shrubs that are being hit by the sprinklers from the grass. There's a difference there.
Yeah.
They're separate sprinklers, but they come on at the same time.
Okay,
You still have that here.
that's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was never changed.
Follow-on question to Jean. If in fact we find ourselves with large areas that are subject to AB 1572, and as a strategy, we do put in the exempt plantings, as your example of the circle, and began to irrigate those, and if there was some oversprinkle, is that a strategy that would be considered street legal or not?
In my opinion, I wouldn't try to employ that strategy. It might get you, if people start to enforce this, it might get you by for a little while, but eventually they'll see you're circumventing the spirit of the law, which is to reduce reduce watering grass. So if you try to circumvent that, and I think they're going to tighten this up as we get closer to it, or as people start challenging this, they're going to put in some rewrites to prevent things from happening. So I wouldn't put any effort into trying to do that, is my recommendation. Yes.
Can you hear me? as slow as the city and state and counties move, do you actually feel that this is going to become reality for HOAs in 2029?
My opinion is no. But I don't have a magic ball. It really, I think, depends on how severe we go into drought, if and when, or not if, when we go back into drought. Once we go back into a drought, more focus will be put on things, and ways to reduce use will become back in focus, and they'll start putting more teeth into this. If we don't go into drought for a while, then I think it's going to just be kind of looked aside based on what happened in our last big drought and when they put all the restrictions out there.
Currently in the Central Valley, in the Chowchilla area, the feds are monitoring wells on agricultural properties and only allowing for the farmer to pump X amount of water. So it's happening.
Yes, sir, it is. So if you want to go to the next page, so what are your options? So there's a few. One option would be, and some people are doing this, if you drive around and look and you see just brown grass, just stop watering it. The grass will die as the summers progress. Weeds will start to grow in them, especially once winter hits and it starts getting wet again. Weeds will start to overtake those areas, which will, as we know, weeds have varying looks and heights, and it will become, if you don't continue to mow it, it'll become unattractive, but it'll be patchy. It'll never look like what turf looks like, which is, an fairly even pattern or just uniformity. So, just doing that, some people might employ it because they say they don't care what it looks like, but I don't think that's a really viable option in my opinion. But also keep in mind, if that was a choice, there still is going to be maintenance needs for that area to keep it looking groomed. So some people feel that, well, if I just get rid of my grass, I get rid of maintenance. Well, that's not true. Maintenance will still need to be done, especially managing leaves as well. When we're mowing grass, we're picking up any leaves that might have fallen. If you're not mowing it all the time anymore, leaves will be on there, and leaves will have to be picked up and take longer, because you can't, when you run a mower to pick up leaves and grass, it's pretty quick. If you now got to start blowing or raking, well, it takes longer to get rid of those leaves. So those are not necessarily good things to employ. Another option would be to renovate and remove the turf and convert to something else. So that something else can be plants, which are allowed to be irrigated still. Putting in some sort of mulch along with plants, rock, or artificial turf is even an option, and some people have done that.
Excuse me, I've seen houses in East Sac where they've removed the lawns and put in low water ground covers that look like grass pretty much, or are green and require a whole lot less water. Is that not an option as well?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you could put in any plant, whether it's a solid ground cover or individual plantings. Each type of ground cover has its pros and cons, and those just have to be understood. Yes.
Would those types of ground covers require modification of irrigation systems?
Yes. So generally, yes and no. You could irrigate them with the turf sprinklers. There are some rules out there about when you renovate an area that, you have to use different types of irrigation. That's low water use. And so depending on what you're doing, and even if, especially if you're going to go for any rebates, the city does have rebates for these type of things. you'll have to change it. They won't allow overhead irrigation. Yeah, I put in here some of the rebate programs. They have requirements in there. This particular one is not necessarily the city of Sacramento's, but they call out that 50% of the area must be covered by plant material, must be low water use class. Then there I wrote it, 100% ground cover could use same irrigation, keep the overheads, will only reduce water use, but needing to irrigate less often. So yeah. Overhead irrigation is just by characteristics of how it works is not very efficient. You lose water from evaporation, overspray, wind, and anytime you can convert to drip, your efficiency goes way up and you have less waste. So that's what we know, and that's what our interpretation of this is. And unfortunately, I can't just say, here's what you need to do, because it's going to have to be your choice. But I feel it would be, before you make any changes or decisions of what to change, you got an interpretation of what the city is thinking. Yes.
So we have 3 or 4 large areas of grass that I think would be crazy to have bark and plants and dusty and everything. It said it could be functional. So for example, one, I don't know, could be like a dog area, you fence it up, or one could be a volleyball area or things like that. Because I hate to give up every single bit of grass, and especially such large areas, to turn into dusty bark and plants.
Yeah, if you were able to turn something into what would be considered functional in their definitions, then yeah, that would work.
Oh, hello? Yeah, are you calling on me? I can't hear you guys.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Please go
thank
ahead.
you. Okay, thank you. I am really thankful and grateful for this information, because I think that there's a lot of misinformation, as you said, going around. So as I'm just really encouraged by a lot of what you're saying. And yeah, I don't know if you're done with your presentation, but I just wanted to suggest that maybe since there is question about enforcement and who's going to be, telling us what to do, that maybe our committee, before we really get down to some of these, getting in the weeds, getting in the specifics of this thing, maybe invite somebody from the city who would be responsible for this. I've read the legislation as well, and I think that there's a phrase in there that says that the water providers by 2027 have to come up with a plan, whatever that means. And, you could drive a truck through that, for how they're going to deal with this. So, this is just fantastic information, and it might be good for us as a community to learn from the city kind of where they are right now, because I agree with you. I don't think they really know what they're going to do or how they're going to deal with this, but also make them aware of some of our issues, some of our challenges that we're going to have with this. So that's it.
Can I ask a question? If you can look at the page that Nick had brought up, so on the first, or right on the first page, for instance. Yeah. So it says, okay, then further down. Oh, keep going. Okay, common area. So it says where property owned or managed by a homeowners association. So we have two private streets here, which is managed by the HOA. Would we be exempt? Would the private streets be exempt from this?
Say, what area would be exempt?
Private streets, which are managed by the association. So we've got city areas and we've got two private street areas. So it says portion of common interest development or for property owned or managed by a homeowners association.
I would say
That's-
that those areas would be considered common area, and common area is
It's
is-
regardless.
it
of-
is considered non-functional, is to follow the regulation of this.
And even though it's in a private area, private street where we manage it, it's okay. Got it.
That's common area, yes.
Okay. And the other question is, we were just reviewing a couple of proposals and requests from homeowners about turf remediation. So the board actually tabled those proposals for 3 addresses because we're not quite sure how to be, with the AB 1572, how we can be, to create a compliant strategy, in other words, in how to move forward on that. That is a little confusing still.
Yeah, until you go to the city and ask them how they're would be interpreting it when the 2029 comes, you really don't know. I feel apartments are excluded. They're allowed to do what they want. So I think you could make an argument. Again, this is just my opinion. You're just like an apartment complex. You have multifamily with grass around it, and why wouldn't we be allowed? So
Yeah.
that would mean you don't have to not water your grass if they would take that opinion. I think there could be a strong argument there, and the HOA thing falls back to the traditional HOA, single family homes that has some turf along the street, and maybe your turf out here along the street that's not in front of a house or a unit would have to go. But the rest, you probably could argue what's the difference? It's the same as an apartment complex.
So before we actually put any money down and, renovate or remediate the turf, what you're suggesting is check with the city, but perhaps it's too early. They won't even know
Well,
now, right?
If they won't give you an opinion, then you're just going to have to, I can't tell you what
Right.
the,
Right. So it comes up to the grounds committee to.
if it was mine, I'd put it in.
Okay. Got it.
Well,
Okay.
If you want turf. That's a whole nother subject.
Nick,
Yeah.
don't you feel it's a little premature to go to the city since this is just kind of in the infancy stage? I would think maybe Nicole might talk to some other HOAs like ours, bigger ones, and kind of find out who's on first, what everyone else is doing before we start
I-
jumping the gun and spending money and doing things that we probably
You could,
shouldn't do at this point.
you could go out and ask what others are doing, but I think you're all going to find everybody's the same. They don't know. And that doesn't mean what this HOA's chosen to do is correct or not. So you could ask, but I don't think anyone has formed any ideas yet.
I'm just referring to talking to the city. I don't want Nepenthe to set a precedent for the city of what's going to become. Because
Yeah,
having worked with cities and counties and states
It's
for years, I know,
it's a gamble one way or the other. So either if you want to make decisions and not, and to whether you should put some grass in or not, but you don't want to put it in if it's going to have to be taken out, the only way you're going to know is if you ask. So if you don't ask, then you're just going to have to make a decision, whether you go for it or you don't.
and the other thing is, 2029 is when it's supposed to be done, not when we start, right?
It's
And
when
so-
they're going to start enforcing it, and you're going to have to self-certify by the end of that year.
My point is, yeah, so 2029, based on this is when we're supposed to meet the requirements of this,
That's
correct?
correct.
At the end of 2029. Yeah, so 2029 is when we have to have met the requirements. And Paula said something about 2027 being when the city will get their act together.
Maybe,
So it sounds like that would be a good time.
maybe. Maybe they'll get their act together is what I'm saying, maybe too.
I think there's probably a big group of people trying to get the exemption for HOAs. And I mean, you've made some points that equate them with things that are exempt right now. So I'm sort of thinking, I think it's going to be kind of positive that we're not going to be impacted as much as we fear.
Potentially, yes,
So
but you don't know. And
maybe that's just-
I don't think there's anybody really talking about this, to be honest with you. I mean, it's just being ignored. Yes.
So what are they doing about parks? Sacramento has a lot of parks. Are they taking all the grass out of parks? Because we have a duck pond with a lot of grass around it and in Campus Commons, but theoretically, you could argue some of ours are parks too. So what are they doing about parks?
I can't answer what they're going to do about it, but the law and the way it's worded considers that to be functional turf because it's used for recreational purposes. So being that it is used for recreational, it's functional, then it can still be irrigated.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, we need to think about that.
I think Ricardo had a comment that he wished to make.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see if I can get off, put my glasses on, activate my screen. Yeah, hi, I'm Ricardo Pineda, 1013 Dunbarton Circle, and I think I may have been the first one to bring this to the AB 1572 to the board's attention. I'm a retired engineer for the Department of Water Resources, but I went to work the next day back for the state as a part-time engineer. And I've been tracking the legislation as it was moving through the legislature. And from what I recall reading in some description that there was no opposition, I would assume that apartment owners lobbying group were successful in excluding them. But whatever association of HOAs did not speak up when the bill was drafted. And my recommendation to the board and to this committee is don't do anything until the city of Sacramento comes up with regulations and that they communicate those regulations. It may take a while. In my own opinion, whatever association of HOAs is out there, they should be considering doing some type of lawsuit. It's always easier to modify legislation while it's still being formulated than after it passes. So it would take an amendment it would take some type of legislative action in a bill to change the requirements that are in AB 1572 right now and exempt HOAs. But I think the bill, from my work as an engineer, working very closely with attorneys on real estate for levees and dams and all this kind of stuff right away, the bill that the requirement to remove watering of non-functional turf is kind of arbitrary and capricious and a taking of our private property under the Fifth Amendment. It's arbitrary and capricious because apartments are allowed to keep it and homeowners are allowed to keep theirs. And if you I ride everywhere. I don't drive anymore because of my eyesight, but if you ride on University, like heading towards American River Drive, you look to the left and you have, what is it called? East Ranch. Their grass comes out, but all the grass of the big houses on the right of University can stay. That to me is pretty arbitrary. And so I think a little bit of lobbying would help in a potential lawsuit. But until the city comes up with regulations, I would not take any action. And I've told the board before that we're sitting over a water gold mine since the American River historically meandered, wandered around the floodplain out here. So we're sitting over gravel bed. So if we were to drill a well, theoretically, if we're looking 50 years down the future for our successors and whoever owns homes, we could stick a well and definitely hit groundwater. Of course, we need to do like a feasibility to make sure that would be, my presumption would be the case, but we're sitting over a groundwater bank. And we could pump that water out. You can get permits to do it. A lot of golf courses have gone to wells, and we could water our all our landscaping with non-potable, meaning non-treated water. Our water supply right now for landscaping and drinking water comes from the Fairbairn Water Treatment Plant out there by Sac State. So we're drinking and irrigating, drinking, whatever treated drinking water, and we're landscaping with treated drinking water. And that's what they're trying to get away from. So at least that's my opinion. Don't do anything until City of Sacramento comes up with regulations. And so, but I do think it's very unfair that apartments got exempted and HOAs didn't. They both serve the purpose of high density housing. So I'm sure we could have more discussions and more strategies about what to plant, to replace turf that is removed. I've seen some low level jasmine that looks pretty nice in certain areas, not here, but at Arden Park. So anyways, thank you. Happy to answer any
you.
question.
Thank you, Ricardo. And Nick, thank you. With closing
just-
remark.
Just to make a quick comment, you had mentioned there was no public opposition to this when it became out. That partially is because of the way they announced it. I got on the when the emergency bans came out, I got on the whole announcements from the water boards so I can keep up on it. And they announced the public comment period was ends. The only announcement they made is the public comment period's ending tomorrow, a day before it ended. There was no announcement ahead of time to let people know it's there and you have a month, or you can come to this meeting and express your concerns. They announced it the day before. So yeah, it was just kind of creeped in.
Thank you very much.
One last observation. I don't mean to be talking too much, but I was just in West Los Angeles over the weekend for a little reunion of coworkers, and I was surprised on how green the grass was driving around through West LA. And I'm going, oh my gosh. So we see more xeriscape, the drought tolerant landscaping up here in Sacramento than I saw in LA. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Yes. And Nick, hopefully we'll have an opportunity to have you back as a guest as we move through the whatever period we need to
Certainly.
related to this
We're always
contentious
available.
issue. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Okay. While I'm still on mic, and I don't know if this is okay, and you could tell me if it is or isn't, we did have a little presentation when we want to provide about mulch, because we as a company did create some confusion on mulch, and we wanted to clarify that. So would now be an appropriate time and okay, or do you want to save that for a future?
No, we had talked openly about that, and it really kind of thought that would fall under probably Carson's and Grove's reports. So we're right in that bailiwick now.
All right, great.
Chair is going to waive its report. And liaison, do you have anything you want to contribute? Okay, let's move right on.
So I have some visuals for those that are here. Unfortunately, those that aren't, you'll just have to go by the handout and the pictures. So in our handout here, I have some different mulch products and some options to be considering and what their pros and cons are. If you go to the last page, just real quick. I just put a little chart here for the different ones and the different characteristics of them. So when you're choosing a mulch, you're choosing mulch for many different purposes. One of them is for the aesthetics of it, how it looks when you're in the landscape. Part of aesthetics is the color of it, how uniform it is, both in size and in texture. So that's one reason a mulch is used, is just for simple, makes it look better. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. We also use mulch for soil moisture retention. There's lots of data out there that says if you have a layer of mulch, it's gonna retain, the soil moisture is gonna be retained longer. Just for simple fact, you created an insulation barrier and reduce the ability of that water that's in the soil to evaporate. So soil moisture retention is important for a mulch. And it's good for the plants and it reduces the need for irrigation. The other thing to be thinking of when you're choosing a product is how well and long does it last? Is it something I have to replace every year? Is it something that's going to last for several years and then I have to either replace it or replenish it is the wording we use. And then the last thing that you want to think about when you're choosing a product is how available is it and or how practical is it in applying or using it. So those are the things to consider when you're looking at products. One of the main products we as a company use on all of our properties is what's called in the industry as walk-on bark. It's basically, it is a bark product. So it's from fir trees mostly. It's a byproduct of from sawmills. So most of the wood that's used for building is fir, and all those logs has to be stripped of the bark before they mill it. And so that bark, it gets has for years now, it's been processed into a product that can be used as mulch. So it's made of bark pieces. Bark is fairly just by nature, it holds up a long time. It doesn't break down real fast. Its color is pretty uniform. You don't generally have to worry, and they don't put any dyes on them to make this color. This is its natural color. And this particular one, the walk-on bark is a shredded treatment. You also might see nuggets, and there's different size nuggets, big nuggets, little nuggets, medium nuggets. It's the same bark. It's just not shred like this. So this is nuggets shred, basically. Kind of like shredded wheat. You want to think of it that way. The difference between this and the nuggets is this has a much better soil moisture retention because the particles don't have a lot of air space that lets you get through the soil. We have a big old chunk of bark and you have a couple, there's always ways and air movement there. So this creates a good blanket, if you want to call it that. And then the other thing is because of the way all the pieces are kind of interlock with each other, when we're maintaining the landscape, whether we're having to blow around it or even rake around it, it tends to stay in place. It doesn't move a lot. So this is why it's used a lot in the landscape, and it's probably the #1 product chosen. And it's why Carson Landscape recommends it. Walk-on bark is kind of our go-to product. There are different looks people want sometimes. So we also use what's called a mini mulch or a mini bark. And that's the same material, just screened out to where you just have smaller particles. It's bark and it's just finer. And it creates just a little nicer look because it's a little finer and it doesn't quite stay in place as well. So it can blow around a little easier, either by wind or by our operations. So we typically will use this in something we really want a fine look to. And we want a really good, detailed, crisp look to it. We'll go with the finer stuff versus this. But these are generally the two that we like to use the most. The next choice, which you see around a lot of areas, and it comes in different colors. I just happen to bring black. There's black, brown, and red. Red is my least favorite, but people seem to use it. This is recycled wood. So basically it's just chopped up pieces of wood, whether it's pallets, extra pieces from building a house, or whatever the wood is that people have collected. It goes into a chipper and it's made into this product, and then they dye it with either whatever color. So to us, we consider this more of a live product because it came off of trees as bark, and it still has some organic breakdown capabilities and some nutrient. As it breaks down, you're going to get some nutrients out of it. This stuff, the wood's just dead wood that's been dead for years. Who knows how long of the pallet that was used to chip this up has been a pallet, and it has no real nutritional value when it does eventually break down. You get a little bit of carbon out of it, but not much more. The reason people are using this is it's less expensive. And some people like the colors better, but the colors fade over time. So if you want to keep it looking good, you have to replenish it frequently. So the cost savings kind of goes out the window, whereas these might last 3 to 4 years, and replenishment, as it's broken down, you got to do that. You might have to refresh this every couple years, but it was cheaper up front. Then the third thing that came up from us and was the use. Why not use tree clipping? When we're processing and trimming trees, all that material, the branches and everything, get fed into a chipper. Everyone's seen them. Everyone's heard them. Why not use that material as the mulch? Well, the reason why we don't recommend it is, and here's some these came right out of our trucks. There's a lot of variability in this type of product, depending on what they're trimming that day. So you could have a lot of leaves, you could have a lot of wood, some wood. It's all different sizes. These are all out of chipper trucks. And so it really depends on what we're chipping that day and what it's going to look like. So if you chose to use this, whatever batch you get, it's going to look different. And so you're going to have, no uniformity in look. Also, it's varying sizes, varying pieces. In this one, we have a lot of leaf load in it. This is a hackberry, and it looks like an oak. Some leaves chip better than others, depends how wet they are. And when they come out of the truck, they're wet. So you have to deal with the wetness that's in there. And if you put it on thick enough to where it's going to make a difference, the moisture that's in this can start to decompose and compost on you. And it just becomes very hard to manage. And it creates something that just doesn't look very good in large open areas where you need the same material. Yes.
Could the natural mulch from tree chipping be used every once in a while? For example, say we're taking down a redwood tree and we would really love to do that tree. I mean, or would this have to be done all the time? Like, do we have to choose one thing for the whole year? Or could we say, oh, wow, we're going to take down that big tree. We would love to use that bark.
Well, it wouldn't be bark. Most of it would be wood. So the bark in a chipped, if you take down a big tree, the big logs don't run through the chipper. So it's just smaller branches. So the bark that you're thinking is favorable on the smaller branches isn't there. So it would just be wood, red wood.
Because I have seen in Campus Commons them do that. They have 4 or 5 redwood trees, and when they trim them or whatever, they do use it just in that area. So could it be done every once in a while? Or would this have to be something we do all the time?
Well, so let me get into the other part of using these products. And let me just show my last sample. This is something that's been, so these were fresh out of the truck. This is material that the city of Sacramento used, which was chipped off of and was probably a couple years old. So the colors will change of this versus this. The other thing becomes down to practicality of it. So if we were to take the material that we used and chipped it and brought it back to our facility and stored it until it could be put onto your property, those piles will begin to compost. And the city or the state of California and county of Sacramento has rules that say you cannot have anything composting on your property in a commercial setting without permits. Because there's chances of fire from composting and smell. So you have to, there's places that compost have to be out and way out in the middle of nowhere and also have permits and be inspected. So we can take this material back to our facility and store it. So the only way to use it is it would have to be spread immediately out of the truck as it was chipped. So if there was a case where you chipped a tree and you wanted it to be spread, I suppose that could happen. But you know, it would have to be decided beforehand. It would have to be known, and that would all have to be worked out. There's a lot of logistics with that. So we are not equipped to be doing that, really, be honest with you. So we don't view that as anything that's viable because it's just not practical in a large scale commercial operation. So these products are really what's your choice, should be your choices, and these are our recommended products. Some feel that well, this gives you a good nutritional value, so it should be used. Well, yes, it could give you nutritional value if it's repeated and laid down in layers year after year after year. Each layer will sit on top of the other. The lower layers will eventually begin to decompose and create, as they break down, nutrients are released. So you have to create what you would think a forest with a layer of litter that's maybe this thick in order to get that effect out of it. And you really can't create that and pile it up that high in a landscape setting either, because it's just going to blow away too. So there's many reasons why this just isn't a practical product to use. And that's why we as a company don't recommend it. Yes. This one is dyed, yes. I don't know the exact dye, FDC number 397, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
What is the fate of the clippings that come out of the chipper truck? What's their eventual?
So the state of California, with all their regulations, of course, requires all green waste to go to composting facilities and be composted. So we have to take it to a transfer station and pay for it to be disposed of there, and then they do with it what they're supposed to do and take it to composting facilities, and it's turned into compost and sold back somewhere in a bag somewhere or in bulk on a farm possibly. All our green waste is handled that way. We have to pay to have someone take it. Generally, you should be getting 4 to 5 years, yeah, with which you might have to replenish a little bit to thicken it up after a few years. Kind of it does fade too. I don't want to say it's going to stay like that for all those years. The sun ultraviolet rays do make it kind of get a little silvery. It just depends on how thick it's put on the first time and the look you want. If you want to keep it looking that fresh color, then you may have to do it that often and replenish it, not replace, replenish. Anything else?
Thank you very much. Very informative.
All right. Hopefully that clears up any confusion we created.
Hopefully we'll have an opportunity with Jay's assistance to make hard copies of the exhibits that you had up on the screen. Great.
Does anybody want to take a picture before they clean it up? Oh, that's okay.
Let me get my blower out.
Yeah.
Oscar, are you ready to go? Okay, Carson, report.
Okay, so our update report. Zone 2, phase 1, we start preparation for the siding and fencing. We also started planting on pink area, zone 4. And we will start doing the installation of the ivy on 2251, 2249 Swarthmore. And blue area, zone 4, we're going to start this month, depending on the siding painting. So we're clear on that. So we control on turf and plant beds. We complete those zone 1, 5, 6, and 7. And we are doing zone 3 and 4 on the, will be the, starting next week. The INF, we're gonna start that on the 20 for all the zones. About watering, right now
Excuse
we
me,
have
Oscar, what are you going to start for all the zones?
the INF, insect and spray control on the shrubs. INF, insect.
Insect and fungus.
Oh, you can start the spraying. Okay.
Mhm. So on the watering right now, we have Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on certain areas. Other areas are Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And some turf areas, they had some trees. We have additional water due to the root systems. We also have the K-rains that are battery operated controllers. There are 13 of them. Also watering on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
What do we want? I didn't understand that.
So you have you mind? So you have your main irrigation controllers that run most of your property. There are some valves that you have out there that there's no wire going from the controller to the valve. Most of them are in the center islands, correct? So those can't be run by the controller because there's no wire. So a battery operated controller is in the ground there. And the manufacturer that makes those is K-Rain. So we called them K-Rain. So they're battery operated timers that we have to independently change this watering schedule on from what the rest of the controllers are. And you have to go up to them and there's no interface with them. So you have to use a mobile app to Bluetooth connect to them and change the schedules. So he was saying those are what, how often? We're on 3 times a week for those, for the turf ones, yeah. And shrubs, some of the shrubs with different lengths of runtime.
About the maintenance pruning, we are complete zones 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7. And at zone 3, we are 70% on it. And zone 5, we are 80%. So that means this month we will complete those ones and start all over again.
Liaison had a question.
Do you mind? Is there a problem with the irrigation on the roundabout on Commons there? Because we had a person who's been rather upset.
Yeah, Oscar had asked me to get involved in that. So what we did is we made some adjustments to the schedule on it. And the water just wasn't soaking in as fast as it was coming out of the sprinklers. So it was starting to run off. So we broke the runtime up into short segments. So if I can't remember the exact numbers, but if we needed a total of 30 minutes, rather than letting it run for 30 minutes, we program it to run for 10 minutes and wait 30 minutes and then do another short burst is what we call it. And since we made that adjustment, the runoff has stopped.
Carol, go ahead. You want to stand up to the mic? They can't hear on Zoom.
Thanks. So you said that with the trimming, you're finishing up zone 5 and zone 3, and then you will start in again at the beginning. So right away, do you have a lag time there?
basically when we finish an area like going around all 7 zones, we will start over. Like on Mondays, we start over on 7 because we do 7 on Mondays. Tuesdays, it will be zone 1. Wednesdays, it will be zone 2. Thursdays, it will be zone 3 and 4. Fridays, it will be zone 5 and 6. On those, the ones that are double them up, we do it 1 week on 3, 1 week on 4. Same is the other ones.
That's the pruning, correct?
That's the pruning.
Thank you, Carson. And now we go to Grove. Paul?
Okay, we're gonna present 2 zones. This is for 5 and 6. So that we can continue with keeping up with our tree schedule. We are just an update on previous zone work. We are working currently through zone 1. We're going to be starting removals. We gave notice to the office on those specific sites. Removal should have tags on them. If they were permitted trees, the city will also tag those trees in it well in advance for us to put our tags on them to notify residents. I also created some new signage that the crews are going to start implementing to try to put out and just provide some more notice of tree crews working in the areas when we're on site. So we're going to be finishing zone 1 in August, and we'll be starting in zones 2 and 3 September, and then working through the end of the year. Now that we're out of hopefully the teeth of the heat for the health of the trees, this is a good time of year to start in on that work. So jumping in to zone 5, and just a quick note, I did make a typo on it would be page 2. It's going to be figure 6. The correct address is actually 1185. I put 1285. So I'll make sure to get that corrected and sent back in. There are no removals in this zone, so all the work is going to be weight reduction, so pruning throughout the canopy to reduce overall canopy weight to help reduce the chance of limb failure on those trees. So we'll start in with our first tree. It's a pistache tree. This tree actually was in process of failure. There was an old cable system installed in the tree between the larger stem and that smaller limb, and there was an inclusion between that attachment area. The cable was actually installed too low. It's an old system. It wasn't something that the Grove installed, but the cable failed. I'm not a big proponent of cable systems because of this. And the inclusion at that branch attachment began to fail. So we actually came in and had to remove that smaller limb back to the trunk to prevent further damage to the tree. So the remaining canopy we want to prune, just again, because there is some weight still in that canopy. There was a smaller limb that did fail afterwards as well. So we do want to address that tree.
I won't interrupt except for this one. So, in fact, in 1 week, 2 other limbs fell. So do we have to wait several months for the rest of that tree to be addressed? Because it's kind of,
This one,
Not doing well.
once we receive an approval, because this tree has had some recent failure, we're gonna try to expedite and get the crews there sooner than later. So again, reducing canopy weight. And so we'll jump into our next tree, which is a tulip tree. Same area, again, another tree that's had some recent failure throughout the canopy. Again, we can see some of the ends of these limbs were getting really overweighted. So again, coming through, reducing end weight on the tulip tree. And then we have a locust. This is actually a really vigorous grower. We pruned this tree. I was looking back through our records. We pruned this tree, weight reduction, at least if not annually, semi-annually. It's showing an excess of growth each year, about 3 to 4 feet of new growth a year. So it's a really happy tree and a really happy spot. So it puts on a lot of new growth each year. So we got to manage that canopy to prevent those limb failures. So our next item, there are 3 trees in this area. Again, tulip trees. We're looking at a lot of this walk, and throughout this year, we've been really looking at the tulips and liquid ambers. Last year, we focused a lot of attention on cedars, redwoods, and elm trees. So again, we're trying to address the other species throughout the community that are showing signs of work in the canopy. Again, pruning the trees to reduce canopy weight. And this is one of our liquid ambers. Again, this is one of our more aggressive growers. These trees are putting on a lot of growth each year. We have been working since 2018 in reducing canopy height. So the height of the tree and bringing the height of the tree down in segments. It's not something that you can do all at one time so we don't overstress the tree. So again, as we reduce branch length, we're also reducing overall canopy height to help keep those canopies nice and concise and help pull them out of, you know, the being able to be have a direct force of wind and catch all that wind force. So reducing canopy height and branch length on liquid ambers is what we'll be looking at this year on both figure 5 and figure 6. And this was the tree. It's actually 1185. So this 1185, we'll adjust that report. And again, another liquid amber. Again, we want to reduce this upper portion of the crown. We'll try to step it down 10 to 15 feet and help keep that canopy nice and concise. And we have another liquid amber. And again, we're looking at reducing some of that growth in the upper crown of the tree. And another liquid amber. This is item number 8. And so again, we'll be doing reduction pruning. Oh, excuse me.
Sorry, Paul.
Figure 9.
I have another question. We
Yes.
did lose a couple of limbs on Vanderbilt other than the other area. Do you think they're getting enough water where they're located?
So I've been looking at all of the tree failure that we've had this year. What I'm finding from a lot of the trees that have had limb failure is a majority of them are in or near turf areas. So I think it's more due to the abundance of water that the trees are getting rather than lack of water. Typically, liquid ambers, when they're in more of a water deficit, they're going to have less growth, you'll see less growth. The canopies will be a bit sparser, a smaller leaf development happens in the tree, and they'll hold and retain moisture a lot better. My general feeling is they're because of the heat and all the moisture that's in the trees, what we're seeing relates to the limb failures in these trees. Again, we're at figure 10. Again, we're doing weight reduction throughout that upper portion of the canopy here to reduce the height of the tree. And this is item number 9, figure 11. Again, we'll be doing weight reduction throughout this canopy.
Paul, can I just ask a
Yes.
generic question? So a lot of times when you prune, and so I'm curious how you prune, the top of trees, they kind of go crazy. So is there a specific method that you have when you're decreasing the height of the trees to prevent that from happening?
Yeah, so there's what we call it's a drop crotch method. So there's a difference between topping a tree and reducing the height. So when we're reducing the height of a tree, We're working in the uppermost part of the canopy and we're reducing it down to a natural lead that's going to take back over as the upper portion of the tree. Now, there may be a bit of sprout development at that wound site, which is actually a good thing because those sprouts produce starches that help produce wood cells that then help with the callus and the healing over. The difference between topping and reducing is we're reducing to a natural lead, whereas topping, you're coming straight across and you're just whacking the whole top back to wherever it ends up being. So that does produce an overabundance of sprout growth because again, whenever we prune a tree, the tree is going to try to make up for the loss in canopy by redirecting growth into other areas of the canopy. So that's why when we're looking at our doing weight reduction, we are reducing from the branch ends in, and that way the way the tree would redirect the growth is in width rather than continuing to elongate and produce heavier branches. And that this is the same for the upper portion of the canopy. We're reducing it into a natural lead point. That's why I said the reduction has to be done in phases where you can't just take it a large amount out at once. That's what's going to trigger an unfavorable response in the growth. We're back at figure number 12, item 10, another liquid amber. Again, pruning throughout the canopy, reducing branch length, reducing canopy height. And we're at item 11. This is a tulip tree. This is 707 Elmhurst. Again, another tree that we're going to be looking at weight reduction, pruning branch ends, reducing the branch length. So this crabapple we saw on Elmhurst, it has a bit of a dieback on one branch. Really unsure what has caused that branch to die back suddenly. We looked at both the trees in the area, felt that this tree could still provide some enjoyment for that area, opposed to removing it and leaving the other one kind of void in that area. So for this time around, we're going to remove that dead portion of the canopy. There was another broken limb in there as well. So we're going to clean that out, clean some weight off the other end to try to keep that canopy looking appealing rather than going the route of removal. And then I believe this is our third to last item, another liquid amber. Again, canopy reduction throughout the branch ends, canopy height. So this particular locust tree, there's this limb that goes over the unit there. I'd like to reduce that limb like at least by 1/4 to half to take away some of the weight on that particular limb. The rest of the canopy, I feel at this time doesn't require much attention. That limb seemed to be overburdened, so I'd like to take some weight off of that tree there. And then our last two trees here, unfortunately, the tree on the right did have a recent limb failure, but again, weight reduction and canopy reduction on those two trees. So that is zone 5. Zone 6. So we do have 2 trees that we're recommending for removal. These 2 birch trees in front of 510 Elmhurst. One of the trees had signs of boring insect in the tree. I believe the next figure has a picture. Oh, right there. So you can see those almost like bullet hole marks there on the larger stem that have kind of a bronzy color. So there's indicators that there's a borer present in that tree. Unfortunately, just with the aggressiveness of these insects, they can cause tree decline rapidly. Both trees also have some dieback in the upper portion of the canopy, so I believe these trees are in more of a decline. Again, birch trees are not long-lived species. They're relatively on the shorter end as far as tree species and life cycle. So with these two trees, I'm recommending removal. And then we jump right into more weight reduction on liquid ambers. So those were our only two removals. The rest of the trees we'll be looking at, again, liquid ambers, canopy height, and weight reduction. And again, with this particular tulip, there's a portion of this upper canopy that's really stretching away from the rest of the canopy. Again, we would reduce that portion, keep that canopy nice and concise. Again, take away any of the potential for, the force of wind to move this branch around in a storm per se and cause a failure there. So that would be an extent of the work and weight reduction through the rest of the canopy of the tree. We have a hackberry here. It's kind of hard just for the area. There's pretty dense canopies from other trees, but the tree is being forced towards the home here at 1005 Vanderbilt due to light competition. So that's the only space of light available for this tree, and it's reaching for it, and it's in response has some really long and overweighted limbs. So again, reducing some of the weight on those limbs, take that potential away from striking the house. And we did find a codominant redwood. We really worked last year to eliminate codominancies, as those tended to be a big failure pattern that we saw during the big storm events. We saw a lot of codominants fail out of the redwoods. So again, we would come in and reduce one of the codominants. We would find the more dominant lead, reduce that second lead either by a quarter or in half. That stunts that elongation, and that codominancy allows the more dominant lead to then take over without really having to alter the shape or look of the redwood. Again, we're looking at a tulip tree. This is 208 Elmhurst, and we're weight reduction throughout this tree. It's a really large tulip tree there in that area. And this is actually probably one of my favorite trees in the whole community. It's a beautiful ash tree at 210 Elmhurst. This is a great tree, probably the healthiest ash tree that is on the property, one of the healthiest ash trees I've seen in Sacramento. Again, we want to manage canopy weight on these branch ends to help this tree continue to support itself. And again, we have another tulip tree because, again, due to a light competition and another large redwood next to it, the trees reached quite a bit over the home here. So addressing some of the weight on this tree over the home. And again, same with this tulip tree. You can see how the upper portion of the canopy, those branches are really laying out there. So again, coming in there, working on managing end weight on those branches to help keep the limbs from having a failure. And we have another liquid amber. There's actually a row of three. It's the end one on this row. And this is 708 Elmhurst. Portion of that canopy, again, reaching over the home. We want to manage weight on that portion of the canopy. And again, another tulip tree. As you can see, they start to get really heavy on those ends, managing that canopy weight on the branch ends there. And this, I believe, is our last one. Again, pruning the tree for weight. And that wraps up zone 6.
Thank you, Paul. And we have proposals for both zones 5 and 6.
So,
If you have a question, go first.
I was just curious, are they all A and there's no AB this time? I didn't notice any breakout.
Yeah, because of the location of all these trees, almost every single one of them was in an area where the potential of failure could impact a home. I didn't see the need to break it into any further at this point. on there.
Okay.
Jean, you had a motion? So I believe we have a motion to approve the two proposals from Grove. I second. Don seconds. Donald seconds. Okay. All comments? All right, then I will call for vote. All those in favor of accepting the proposals from Grove, please say aye or raise your hand, or both. Okay, passes. We've got it. Unanimous. All right. Paul, thank you. Oscar, thank you. Nick, it's a pleasure meeting you. Hope to see you again as we start to get strangled with AB 1572. Okay, we're in good shape.
Yeah, so ANSI is American National Standard Institute. So ANSI is a governance, it's a national governance. It covers a broad spectrum of industries. This one, the 300 standard, covers tree care, how trees are managed as a standard nationally. So in accordance with how the National Standards Institute wants us to care for trees, we manage trees in accordance with that standard.
With that, we will move on to zone walk notes and proposals. And we would start with zone 1. And as a reminder, Teresa's up.
This is, the first photo that you see is in zone 1, right outside the clubhouse. And as you can see, it's pretty bare. So I don't know if you want us to read the recommendation. Maybe that would be good, especially for zone people. But the recommendation is to add appropriate plant material from the plant palette list, add drip and Berry Creek rock on the outside perimeter. I would need to ask Oscar.
On that particular one, you can. On that particular one, you can also do some ground cover, but you already have existing plant material in the middle of it. So it just better to do some plant material around, and you're gonna have a line of around of the rock, so that way you can also avoid any runoffs.
Is that okay?
You were on the walk, or?
Yes.
So that's what would look good to you when you saw it, was to.
Actually, there was more than Oscar. Yeah, you can see who attended. This was a major zone walk. I mean, or that's the scheduled one. So there were a lot of people there.
Guys thought would look good, because I mean, I'm like Mary, from far away, it looks like, oh, well, you can just put ground cover around it, but I guess it's probably a pretty large area to
I-
do that.
Yeah, my take on it is that those shrubs would have a big circumference, and they would provide shade to the ground, so you wouldn't have to have ground cover under there. I believe so. It says plant material from the plant palette list. But that's what it means. Okay, this area is directly outside, this actually beyond this wall, and people enter here often from Commons Drive. And the recommendation for this area, there is a lot of bare ground and some dead plants also. So, and also evidently a tree was removed and the roots, what do you call them? Saplings maybe are coming up from those roots, correct? And the recommendation is to grind those roots, remove the netophin, remove 2 azaleas that were failing or that failed, add appropriate plant material from the plant palette list, add drip to the new plants, remove dead ground rubus, and add bark. Add Berry Creek rock in the area along the clubhouse siding, I think to catch rainwater coming off the roof. And that's the end of the Zone 1 report. Yeah, this is the recommendation, yes. I moved to, I don't know if I moved to recommend to the board that we do that? Is that the protocol? Yeah. Okay. And of course, I moved to have the board recommend that the board accept this proposal.
Okay, Jean seconds. All those in favor, please. That will come later.
So do we have to come back and approve the cost? What if we don't approve the cost?
The way we're working is that if the scope of work is appropriate, a proposal comes down and the negotiation on the proposal and its cost will be done by the board. We're recommending whether or not this should be addressed.
So then the board makes a decision on the cost. We don't have anything to do with the cost.
Correct.
Thank you.
So when this goes to the board, it goes with a cost?
Yes. That's their function. We'll go with our recommendation, our observation, our recommendations. It will come with a formal proposal beyond the notes and recommendations from the steward.
Just as an update, we haven't actually gone that route yet. So this is the scope of work, just for an update. This is the scope of work. If the committee feels that they would like to move forward, then Oscar, the office will ask Carson to provide a proposal. That proposal will come back to the Grounds Committee to review right for now. Well, you will then recommend approval at that point,
And
once you see.
When the
what-
proposal comes, it has a cost.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, that had, yeah.
Okay, I would like to rescind the motion. Can I do that? Sure. But it was.
I think you have to move forward to get the proposal, right? That's what she.
Well, I guess when I do the minutes, I would like to have appropriate vocabulary so that we're not having the confusion as to where we are in the process. So maybe the motion needs to be that we move this to, what is the right vocabulary? Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
And that will be the nature of all of these zone walks. So they're all going to go the same way. And as mentioned, the proposal will come back with detail for consideration, for recommendation. We good? Good. All right. Let's go to Zone 2. And I think we voted.
I need a motion, get a second on it, and then.
How we doing? I
Teresa,
thought
can
we
you
did
just
our
make a
vote.
motion to, yeah.
If we did not vote, and there was a motion and a second, then I call for a vote. Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous.
Can I say something, please?
Paula, yes, I hear
Hello?
your voice.
Yeah, yeah, and my hand's been raised for a while. I'm going to abstain. I cannot hear the discussion, and so I can't vote on stuff that I don't hear. So I'm abstaining. And I'm going to ask if people could really try and use the microphone. I'm really
That's-
sympathizing with homeowners now.
Very fair request. We'll go to zone two.
So I abstain.
We'll go to zone two's homeowner landscape request. And this would be zone two. Unfortunately, Diane is under the weather a little bit and couldn't attend, but as the junior partner of zone two, we have an issue with a request for ground cover outside of 1276 Vanderbilt. And the recommendation, let's add some appropriate irrigation, a couple of plants, and add bark with rock if appropriate around the downspout.
How come no ground cover? Because that's what they asked for. Ground cover is, ground cover, and that's what they wanted. Is there a reason why that's not being provided?
It is, it's add bark, it says there. And yeah. It does, it says add
Correct.
bark, so, yeah, and Berry Creek rock around downspout.
I know, I read that, but I'm reading what the owner wanted ground cover.
He replied correct to your question, whether it was sensitive. He replied correct.
Root issue?
The problem for that section is just a lot of roots from the tree. So if you install some of the ground cover in there, they basically gonna be competing with the root system. So it's not gonna have a good growing on it.
Okay, so at this point, it's appropriate to move to accept the recommendation. Since it's from our zone, my zone, I move the recommendation be accepted. Looking for a second. Thank you, Jean. All those in favor? Aye, thank you. Moving on to zone 3. And that would be Mary.
Okay, a homeowner requested that the crepe myrtle be taken out because they didn't like the blossoms dropping on their mailbox. So, my comment is, it's a beautiful tree. We have more blossoms with crepe myrtles this year than usual, and Carson comes by every week and takes care of the blossoms, so I recommended the tree just remain. Okay, and then there was one other one. So this one, I couldn't tell when I looked at it whether these dead plants had irrigation or not. Couldn't answer that. And it looked like the yard was a combination of old plants and new plants, old plants that were there when there was a tree and new plants that came afterwards. So the existing plants are not doing well because they don't have the shade they used to have, and the new plants are doing fine. So my recommendation is to check for irrigation. And I don't know if I know there's that ivy there where the tree was that could easily be filled in. And I don't know why another tree wasn't planted there or not. It's just a question. Because the shade would allow the existing plants to be happier. So that's a question. I don't know. I have known nothing about why that tree came out.
Oscar, would a tree be appropriate in that
The
location?
tree that was replaced is on the other side on 20 to 14, I believe it is on the next one. And it's been planting a tree on that side.
Okay, so there isn't going to be a tree that provides shade for this house.
No, on that little section that you see, it was a lot of weeds in there. They got spread out because that particular bed, it's a mixture of strawberry with ivy. So, and 3 sections of those ones were weeds. So we take care of the weeds. We're just gonna clean that out and let the ivy just keep growing in there or fill it in.
Okay, I thought it was a tree removal. Well, so my recommendation is that looks horrible, that the ivy could, some ivy could be put in there, and it doesn't look like a dead hole in the middle of their front yard.
And just so you know, on those plants back there, you're right, that's why they fell, and the irrigation is working. You can see water in those plants. They water with the same system is the ones that are alive.
Oh, yeah, see, I couldn't tell when I was out there because it was already dry. So I don't know, what do you want to do about it? If it's watering?
Correct. It's just more about filling that in. It's not just that one, it's like another 3 sections that we can do the same thing.
Oscar, would there be a hardier plant that could replace the azaleas? Was that azalea?
No, camellia.
Is there a hardier plant that could be put in there?
Yes, basically we can just look into the plant palette and choose a better one for that because the reflection also of the window, the heat from the window affects those plants.
Okay. So I guess based on, I didn't have full information. I did say fill in the ivy because it does just look like a gigantic dead hole that isn't being filled in, and whatever appropriate, I didn't know if there's irrigation or not, whatever is appropriate that will live in that area would be nice. And since there was no tree there, I thought there was, we can subtract that out of the recommendation.
Are you moving for acceptance of your recommendations?
Of course I am.
So Mary, your revised recommendation is to replace those 3 camellias with a hardier plant from the plant palette, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And ivy to fill in that dead hole, and no tree since there wasn't a tree.
I need a second.
Jean.
Jean will second. All those in favor of Mary's proposal? Approved.
Aye.
And we come to zone 4, and Paula's with us long distance, I hope.
Very long distance.
I was just going to say, I'm not going to say how far away you are, but it's good to hear your
Many
voice.
thousands of miles. Okay, this was my first zone walk, and there were a couple of homeowner requests and there were some observations. This first one was a homeowner request. There was some remediation done after the siding project, and the homeowners wanting the ivy removed from in front of the home. There's a hedge, and there's been kind of a number of things done, but the ivy is kind of unsightly, and the hedge is just sort of sticking out there by itself. And when we were out there, we noticed that the ivy was sort of patchy in the front of the house. This first picture looks at the front. And if you could scroll down a little bit, yeah, there you go. That shows the front of the house. So my first instinct was, that hedge just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb, but the owner wasn't asking for anything to be done. So the recommendation is to remove the ivy from that front, that side part in the driveway, and not plant any extra additional plants, and to take a look at the ivy and fill in the ivy in the front of the house where it's very patchy. And also there's a really giant overgrown camellia that is on the side of the house and by the fireplace. And so the recommendation is to have Carson look at it, possibly trim that camellia bush. The second one is a homeowner request. And I was kind of, it was kind of weird because I misread this. I thought this homeowner was asking for a tree to be planted in his front yard, which had been remediated as a result of the siding project. But we ran into him during the walk, and what he's wanting is a tree between his home and the home next to him. And I think you can see from the picture, there just is not enough room for a tree there. And in terms of just the size of it, the light and irrigation for a tree. And Christina pointed out that the board policy is not to put trees anymore between houses. So my recommendation is to deny this request. The
Paula,
next
quick question.
one is a
Paula,
homeowner request.
Paula, can I ask a
Yeah.
question? I can't tell how wide it is, but is there something else? It looks,
It's possible some maybe lower scale things. I don't know the irrigation system back in there. Oscar, you were there. Do you know if there's irrigation there?
sorry, okay. I don't know what was there before the bark. Is there, I don't know if there's irrigation there still, but perhaps maybe some green would help the homeowner?
It is irrigation on that area because we have one plant backward by the window that is back there and the fence.
Mhm. Well, I guess I'm confused. If the owner, like what is our scope of what we can recommend? In some cases, I was told if the owner didn't ask for it, don't do it. And then the other is, do we consider it maybe as a mitigation measure? It is very fair looking, but definitely I don't think a tree would work. So we could keep it and go take another look at it and see if there's some alternatives there.
Up to you. You're doing the recommendation. It just looks rather barren
Okay.
is my only observation.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, and again, I learned this on the day of the walk. I had been thinking the whole time he wanted the tree in the front, and there's a ton of growth in the front. So anyway, this is what I think that maybe some back and forth with the homeowners would be helpful before we come to the grounds committee. But yeah, I mean, I would be open to considering that or suggesting it at least. So I don't know what the protocol is, Jim. Do I go talk to the homeowner and say, well, we don't like the tree, but how about some bushes or some lower scale plants?
Oscar, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I just want to mention that on the picture, you guys don't really see, but in front of that, it's a couple shrubs in front that is going to take over and basically kind of block that section out.
Say that again now.
What are the dimensions on that section, Oscar?
That probably around between the rock, it's going to be probably 5 feet. And the depth is going to be probably 15 or so.
I think Paula was asking you to just mention again what you just said about the shrubs in front.
Oh, I said that where you take the picture, whoever take the picture, it's shrubs in front of that along the sidewalk. That those ones, as soon as they grow up, they kind of gonna start like blocking that view, so they're gonna be able to see some plant material in there. And also the other reason that they don't want no shrubbery in between. Paul Reeves from the siding project basically recommends no shrubbery in between because the moisture that basically damaged the siding. We was having a section that it was having a really nice maple that they couldn't even work around it, and it was just basically all rotting the siding. So we had to move that one out of the way and not putting anything back in.
I would just like to point out there was no picture with this. I took this picture, or maybe somebody else did, but it did not come from the homeowner. That's why I thought that the homeowner was asking for the tree in the front yard, not the side yard. So maybe we want to hold this back. Can we hold this back a month? That would be my recommendation. So that we, you know, we can all talk face to face and go out and take a look at it again. But yeah, I didn't know that that was Paul Reeves' recommendation. The next item is a homeowner request. One side of his walkway was remediated on the other, it's on the other side of the house, but the first picture shows this very, very narrow planting area adjacent to his house. And that was not part of the remediation. And the homeowner is requesting to replace those plants in the vicinity of the front door, which I'm assuming is this very narrow planting strip. And basically, they just need to be trimmed. They look scraggly. And that space is so narrow, it's just hard to think of anything that could go in there. So that would be my recommendation, is that to note that the recently planted shrubs on the other side are fine and they're going to grow in to fill in that area, but that these boxwood shrubs just need to be trimmed back and cleaned up. And that
They
would
are
be my
trimmed and
recommendation.
Cleaned up, just so you know. Already been done.
Did you hear that, Paula? Paula, did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So what does that do? Does it now get deleted from the report or what?
I think you can just add that it's been taken care of, or we can in your motion.
Okay.
That's already happened.
And we
Okay,
can,
all right.
Paula, obviously the instructions will be to the office to let the homeowner know that the landscaping meets current standards, correct?
See, I don't know what that phrase means exactly.
Meaning that
So
the
I'm very
landscaping-
reluctant.
Yeah, that the landscaping
That
as
we're
it
not-
stands does not require additional planting or work.
Correct. Yeah, Jim gave me that explanation, and that's why I added it to the report. But yeah, exactly. I know I didn't see it in the other reports.
Yeah, yours is
So
perfect.
yeah.
actually.
Okay, so the next one was an observation that I had made on when I was doing the tree walk, is that there was this ivy shrub here at 1423 Commons, and it was just growing. It was growing like 2 or 3 feet up on the fence, and this is a brand new fence, and it seemed like nobody would want that stuff adhering to the fence, and so the recommendation was a work order to be created, and I see a note has been added that the shrubs have been pruned. And
Yes, it has been
then
done already.
yeah, that's what the note was added to say. And then the other one is, this was on Dunbarton, and all along there's the sidings being done there. It's on the east side of the Dunbarton pool. And of course, with the recent heat that we had, the ivy is just devastated. It looks like it's dying. And but I think the agreement was that we should wait until the siding is done and go back and take another look at that. And Oscar, suggested that it could be raked out and cleaned up. And then once that siding work is done, make an assessment on maybe there's some irrigation problems with the ivy, or maybe some additional planting would need to be done. And in addition, a tree overhanging a chimney at this address was noted. So that would be my recommendation, is just to wait to the end of the siding. But in the meantime, go out and rake it up, and then come back, keep track of this, and then come back afterward and see if there's anything else that needs to be done. And then, this next one is at 712 Dunbarton. I observed that it didn't look like a really bad problem, but the tree that tree was starting to touch the roof and overhang the roof. And so the recommendation was to the office to follow up with the homeowner and advise the homeowner. And I see a notice been added that the office has so advised the homeowner.
Thank you, Paula. Now, I'm assuming that you're going to move to accept your recommendations in the
Yes.
form of a motion.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations with the exception of 1012 Dunbarton. I'd like to go back and, you know, take another look at that and kind of get the full information that I did not have today. So I'm
Jean,
asking to
seconds?
hold off on 1012.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, moving on
Aye.
to Zone 5. Don and Jean.
Okay, ours aren't as fancy. It's our first time doing it. We just have a couple. Don and I walk zone 5 and 7 together. 7's new to me and he's nice and comes with me there. So 1257 Vanderbilt. I don't know if you can tell from the picture, but it's super bare there. And we think the front could use a plant and we would go with Oscar's recommendation. What do you think, Oscar?
Yeah, basically in that section, it needs some plan in there. I just have to go back and see sun exposure on that area and make my recommendation for the plant palette.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, the next one, I call it the tunnel. It's a big area off Vanderbilt. A fourth has been remediated with bark, and then a little area, another area has been a little bit remediated with bark, but the plants really suffer every summer because the roots are showing, there's ferns planted there. There was Berry Creek, there are trees, but it just, to me, looks really, really bad. And I would love to get some bark in that area because it's been a couple years and the roots are all exposed. What do you think?
Correct. That area basically never had been adding any type of bark to keep the moisture down.
Because it could be pretty. I mean, it has Berry Creek, has a lot of ferns, has a lot of trees, and it could be pretty. So great.
Yeah, we kind of refreshed the dry creek, but never has been refreshed the bark on that area.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, next. The next one is a homeowner request. So it says homeowner is requesting that Laura Petalum bush planted in front of his window be removed and replaced with something smaller. So Dawn and I would like their bushes, and the bushes on the house next door even higher. So we just recommend that the bushes be pruned, and then we can revisit the idea of adding or replacing bushes after the siding is repaired. Dawn also spoke to the homeowner who is fine with this.
We pruned the shrub after they basically was coming out, tell us about what the situation was. So we bring them down so they can be able to see through that window.
Okay, great. Thank you. Already did it? Or, oh, great. Okay,
It's been
take a
done.
look. Well, okay, great. Thank you. Is that it? Oh, that's it for 5. Okay. What do you guys think? Okay.
Are
Oh.
you moving?
Okay, I make a motion to approve the recommendations for zone 5. Aw.
Sorry, Mary, you lost out. Too slow. All in
Okay,
favor?
it's just a couple things.
Okay,
Okay, zone 6.
we're good. On to Zone 6, my bailiwick. Have just a couple of things. We had a request at 700 Elmhurst. And essentially what has occurred is that during seasonal rains, the homeowner sees an accumulation of rainwater on the lower left portion of her gate. And it sits there for a while and then dissipates and runs off, and she's asking for a drain. And as she notes, I personally added some pea gravel and tried to make a little trench, but slope is not enough. After taking a hard look at this thing and what would be involved in the minor pooling that is involved, and she showed us, it's really not a threat to the foundation. And the landscaping does meet current requirements. And this is a very seasonal thing, so recommendation is just to let it stand as is. However, around the corner, on a walkway, at, I'm sorry, yes. Down 702 Elmhurst, there's a long fence unit that, now the previous address is right where it says 702 Elmhurst on the notes. So you're taking a walkway between 700 and 702 on the left. And we've got a couple of things here. We've got some Nandinas that are alive, and we've got one very sick puppy, which I'm recommending that we remove. It also has very, very sparse ground cover, and we're recommending that Oscar take a look at providing some kind of cover that would be appropriate for that location. Photo 2, a bit further right next door on 700, we see that they noted that about a year ago, a shrub had been replaced because the previous one had died. And they said it's not growing, the replacement's not growing the right way. It's growing too big. Well, it turns out that the replacement shrub is exactly the same genetically. It's just that they were, Carson was able to provide a larger plant. And so Big Brother stands right there and they're saying something's wrong. So the recommendation is just to prune it back.
It's already been done.
And it's been done. So they can all grow out together. And finally, between the back end of 701 and what would be maybe 704, there between the two homes, there's an extended plantings, 702. And it was pretty rough. And Oscar was kind enough to go in there with his team and trim up all of the shrubs appropriate, and it has been done. It looks great. So my recommendation and my motion is that the remediation work on the walkway for 702 Elmhurst be adopted. I need a second. Thanks, Jean. Oh. Excuse me, I thought we didn't flip the page. They're sticking together in my version. Oh, I am very sorry. We have some, oh yes. We have another couple of issues. Bark replenishment at 310 Elmhurst. And that's something that, while it needs to be done, there seemed to be some concern about this is a community-wide, area-wide issue. And perhaps we might discuss this a bit further, which had been done with the presentation, but no exact recommendation other than bark is definitely needed there or some form of appropriate ground cover. And so that's about as far as we can take it. The final thing, two things very quickly. 208 Elmhurst. We have a very tough looking shrub along a plant line that may be the result of poor soil condition. We've got at least some sickly looking shrubs along that whole line. And the thought was really to remove and add a drip system and appropriate plants for the area because it really looks kind of gnarly. And finally, there was a dead azalea that was removed last year, and the homeowner is at 606 Elmhurst is asking for a replacement, and the recommendation is indeed to do that. Sorry, my page is stuck together, but I move that the recommended actions for Zone 6 be taken. Jean, second.
I have a quick question. This is protocol. Just who's actually taking down what's been already done by Oscar or the changes? Who's actually writing this down right now? Do we need to keep track or? So as we're going, sometimes things are changing or not, right? Is it?
They have been,
Oh, you're recording it. Okay, thank you. Because I didn't see you writing and I just thought, are we going to remember this at our age? Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
all in favor? Aye.
I,
Okay, finally, there was a note on Zone 7.
Okay, I know you're tired of hearing me by now, but Don came with me on our first Zone 7 walk. Most of it looks fantastic, but we did notice at 1617 University, it doesn't look too bad, but it's truly just a long line of dirt on either side. And I'm not sure what Oscar would recommend. Do you remember this place, Oscar?
Yeah, so basically on that place, I mean, it has not been done anything, and yes, we wouldn't need to put a couple of plant material on the entryway and some on the fence area.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure, why there's nothing, if the homeowner doesn't want anything or what. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I make a motion to approve a proposal from Oscar for Zone 7.
All in favor? Aye.
I,
Okay, that concludes the zone walk notes and proposals. And as we round the bend towards adjournment, we do have an option available for any homeowner that might want to comment or. Please. Yes, please join us up at the microphone up there so the folks that are on Zoom can hear. Please give us your name and your address.
My name is Ann Pasek, and I live at 2326 Swarthmore. Welcome. And I'm very pleased for the opportunity to be here and speak before the committee. I wanted to follow up on the conversation at last month's meeting regarding the CAL FIRE recommendation for the 10-foot tree branch distance from chimneys. I know this is a topic that the committee has already been looking into. And every year we see wildfires in the news all across Northern California. And nowadays these fires are not just in rural areas and forests. They've been happening in towns such as the town of Paradise, which several years ago was completely destroyed by fire. There's nothing left, not even any trees. Fires can spread so quickly and they create their own wind, which pushes the fire faster into surrounding areas. Here in Campus Commons, we live in wooden structures that are in high density housing. If a chimney fire were to start here, it would quickly consume large swaths of our community and easily jump across Howe Avenue and also jump across University Avenue to spread further. I don't know whether any of you have ever seen an out of control fire before, but the fire creates tremendous wind, and the fire spreads not only from structure to structure, but also goes up the trees. And then there are these chunks of embers from the trees that move through the air with the wind that's created by the fire and attach to other trees and also drop down on other structures. And these can stay in the air for quite a distance. I mean, it could go clear past Howe Avenue and into, what's that other condominium complex over there? A number of other places. So it's really a very big, important thing to look at. It's not a fun thing. It's not let's say like putting in beautiful new plants or anything like that, which are very important. But this literally affects people's lives. I've seen people's lives totally ruined by it. And then there's all of the additional fallout, the lawsuits, the insurance hassle. It goes on and on for years. And I've noticed a number of non-compliant tree branch to chimney situations in Nepenthe. One example is 500 Elmhurst, which involves a tree in the common area. And this is just one example. And also, I would implore all of you to please look at the owner's tree inside of the patio at 100 Dunbarton. It has twiggy branches that are just barely above the chimney. And if the resident builds a fire in the fireplace this fall, chances are pretty likely that it'll start a tree fire. And since autumn is quickly approaching, I have 3 questions for the committee. Number 1, what is your schedule for trimming tree limbs from the chimneys in the common areas to make them compliant with the CAL FIRE requirements? Number 2, how are you dealing with homeowner tree limbs that are non-compliant with CAL FIRE and that are obviously the homeowner's responsibility? And number 3, have you discussed this with the landscape people on the other side of Campus Commons to find out whether they have non-compliant tree limbs that could start a fire in our community, because it would spread everywhere? So those are my
Thank you for your
questions.
comments and concerns.
Pardon?
Thank you for your comments and concerns. And we've got the right guy here at the table, Paul Dubois, to hear your concerns, and hopefully that'll be, if you wanted to comment now, Paul, or at a later date.
Well, we do annual pruning throughout the community for building clearance. That would include the chimneys. We typically do that at the beginning of the year. So January, February would be the time of year that we'd be coming through for that work.
And between now and then, people are going to be using their fireplaces. I mean, do you need to send out a notice telling everybody that they cannot build fires in their fireplace until March? I mean, honestly, it's
Outside of that time, I would recommend, if a homeowner has a concern, to call into the office, and we'll go out and take a look at it and see if we can address it prior.
because a lot of people don't really realize the gravity of this situation. You know, they might not realize they live in this beautiful planned community where everything is kept up so wonderfully. And they might just think nothing of going ahead and building a fire in the fireplace. And then suddenly there's a big problem that affects many of us.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sue Henderson, 216 Dunbarton. I live there with my husband, Marty. We've lived there for 14 years, pretty happily, loving this community. I'm really tired, so I'll do my best. I spent the morning with my friend with dementia. That kind of wears you out. But as a reminder, refresher, May 1st, 19 shrubs and plants were removed from our front yard, and without warning, and it was pretty shocking. I talked about that last time I was here. I put some notes so I can stay on track. I'm here today to find out what now. At the end of this month, it will be 4 months that our yard has looked, our common area, but our entrance to our home has been with 3 little plants in the front yard. I call them little survivors. Our home juts out. It's very expansive. You can't miss it. A lot of people ask me all the time what's going to happen. So I'm here today to ask what's going on. I noticed they plant some plants next door, and my husband went out to talk to the gardeners, but they don't know. They said, oh, we have to do all this other area first. But we're right out in front there. I understand plants are still being removed. I didn't come to talk about that myself personally, but without notice to the residents, it's pretty traumatizing if you go through something like we did. let's see. I do appreciate the empathy I received from some of you last time I came and talked about how it affected us.
Oscar,
What
did we
I'd
have
like
an
to know
update?
now, excuse me, I have more to say, but yeah, I would expect some kind of communication, but there's been absolutely none with us. I know they don't have to tell us when they're coming around, but living with this for almost 4 months is really pretty unacceptable. And we're waiting to have some plants planted. And I really feel bad that, it took money to take them out and now it's taking money to restore them. But I also hope at the same time, there will be some attractive looking plants and landscape in that big area. It's an area people see every day that drive down our street. And it doesn't reflect well on this committee and the board. Thank you.
What's the update on that?
As I mentioned on the beginning, basically we finished on pink area on zone 4 and
216.
and the blue area is on the
I
216.
did
So
know.
on that, we're gonna probably waiting for the siding to be painted on that blue zone, and we hoping they finish by the end of August.
Our house is finished. It's
Well,
been finished for a couple of weeks.
it has to finish the whole area in order for me to start building everything.
Ours. Oh. Okay, thank you.
Sue, did you want, is it possible because her area has been torn out so long and it's so huge to ask about what plants she might want or would make, improve the look of her house?
About suggesting plants, we have the plant palette. She can bring that up to the office and they can decide if they want to go with a particular plant material.
Okay, so she does have that option. Okay,
To go to the main office, yes.
okay. Thank you.
I think Ashley's got her hand up. Thanks for waiting.
Oh, hi. Let's see.
Ashley, you need to unmute.
Yeah, hi, Ashley Tongarose at 1317 Vanderbilt Way. And I missed a lot of the meeting, my apologies, but I just wanted to point out a lot of the work or a lot of the issues that have come up on the zone walks and homeowner requests is work that it has been recently done. And, just the inconsistencies, Mary had an idea a few years ago, which was to have kind of like a template for certain situations. And I still think that that would be great. I think we need a professional landscape designer, preferably a landscape architect. But this should be, a lot of it should be warranty work, like those Nafina, I forgot, there was that fence with these like little scraggly things, that should be done for us for free. And I want to make sure that we aren't paying for that over again because we already paid for it once. So if Oscar, since he's here, it'd be great for you to respond to that about the warranty policy for things that weren't really done that well.
Guarantee policy is a year, and if the plants are alive, we're not gonna replace them.
Okay, but if they look scraggly and the design was poor and it was a poor design choice to begin with, you're not going to stand by that? Can you say that for the camera, the recording?
If they look struggling, that's why we have the maintenance pruning, so they will go by and prune them as needed.
Yeah, but I think maybe you guys have enough money now to hire someone, to make maybe some better design choices. Just putting it out there. Because it's
Thank you, Ashley.
inconsistent. Some projects look good, others don't. That's all I'm going to say. I keep saying it, but I think you guys make enough money to bring someone
Thank you,
in-house
Ashley.
at this point. Thank you. I didn't talk about the money,
Questions
Jim.
from homeowners?
I just have one quick question. When we had our last meeting, zone 4, I think it's Paula's zone, there were A and B trees and we approved A and we didn't approve B, but I think all of them were approved in the board meeting. I was just curious as to why.
It was purely for liability issues. So in other words, if the professional we hire has recommended pruning and maintenance, and if that tree of a branch that the committee has decided does not need to be pruned, but if that branch does fall onto somebody or into a home or on a person, etc., we face liability. So for liability issues, we have gone ahead to say, yes, we need to do the pruning. If the professional is recommending pruning, then we cannot just turn around. The board, a board decided this. It was a unanimous decision that moving forward, we will not separate into the priorities A and B. We are just going, it's just going to be pruning. And that was a decision made by the board, and it was a unanimous decision.
Okay, well, when we asked
And
Paul
I
about
will-
it,
Can I
when we
add
asked
some?
Paul about it, he said it could wait a year. So that's why I was curious.
Right.
Understand
Can
that
I,
we have a professional licensed, carries E&O, the firm carries E&O. Their professional opinions prevail. That's the reason they're here. Okay, I'm sure you know that. So with that, Paula,
Wait,
I'm
wait,
sorry, I
wait,
didn't
wait,
see your
wait.
hand again. Go.
yeah, yeah. I'm just curious. I really thought that would be discussed in the chair and liaison report today. So I guess my major request is that when in fact the committee votes to recommend something to the board, it really would be helpful to have that feedback loop so that we understand what the lay of the land is and what the ground rules are. Otherwise, we're pounding our head against the wall and not getting the feedback from the board.
Yes, my apologies on that. The meeting continued, so Jim asked if I wanted to make a liaison report, and he also decided not to do a board report in order to give more time to Nick and to Paul and Oscar. And the reason being that we have to actually end our meeting now. We've actually gone over. The outreach committee requires this room because they have to set it up. So we were told 5 o'clock we had to end. So that's absolutely right. That was going to be part of something I was going to mention, but yes, apologies on that.
From me too, Paula. Finally, okay, Ashley, you're up for 1.5 minutes, and that's it. Go.
Okay, yeah, just, going back to people being kind of unhappy. We're spending a lot of money on this. They're not getting warned, even if they are warned. I think including homeowners a little bit more in, maybe deciding things from the plant palette, or it's, terrible for us since there's not anything in the proposal saying what they're going to get. We have no recourse on Carson to go back there and plant something that, to make it look better. But, I think this just signals from what I heard today that we need to put an end to this, even though we're doing the paint and siding, that maybe we should revisit this after it's done and get some higher quality work. So that's, I don't know who else as a vendor gets to put together proposals like that just say 4 guys, 46 days, 160,000, it looks, and then
Okay.
$1,000 per house times 46, that's 46,000. I mean, it's just not the industry norm, and
I
that's
think we
all
got
I'll
the gist
say.
of it. Ashley,
Okay, well, it
thanks.
needs to end.
Paula, thank
And-
you for commuting all the way from Eastern Europe. You must be staying up pretty late. I think you're about 10 hours ahead.
Yeah, it's about 2:30 in the morning.
Okay, you're a trooper. Thanks. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody, for your patience.